Hey guys, it's Peter here, your finance PT. As you can see from the title, today we're going to be speaking about savings. So I'm going to be going through different types of savings that you can have and how you can get started, especially if you have very minimal savings or perhaps you're restarting your savings. Maybe you had to spend the savings you had on something important, or you just somehow managed to blow your savings without realizing it, which also happens as well. So something that I've found with a lot of my clients is that savings is an area that they do struggle with, and it's not always necessarily because of what they earn, but sometimes it's because they have very high expenses, they have debts that they pay on a monthly basis, and again, that makes it a lot more difficult to be able to save. So I really hope that you guys find this video useful, and whichever situation you find yourself in, it's going to help you to kind of get things going and to get started. So starting off, why are savings important? Savings are important because it allows you to have a reserve to rely on if anything is to happen. A lot of the times people end up getting into debt because they have no reserves. Their reserves is their credit card or their overdraft, which aren't, for me personally, these are not viable sources of a reserve that I'd want to use in an emergency. Because again, a lot of the times when you are paying these things back, there is interest added to it. Of course, if it's an interest-free credit card, that's a different story. But again, you still have that debt you need to pay back. So I think it's really important, especially given the uncertain times we live in. And even before, the pandemic, life is uncertain. And a lot of the times things happen, things break, needs arise. So it's important to have savings to be able to help you to pay for things as they arise. And it really just prevents you from getting yourself into unnecessary debt. But that's for another story. So that's why it's important. If in your mind you think, it's not that important, a lot of people kind of think, I don't want to save just in case something happens, because what if nothing happens? But at least then you have that money which you can then invest into other things. A lot of people want to get started with investing. And one thing you have to understand, you can't invest zero. You need to have money to get started when it comes to investing. So it's really important to have the basics. Saving is a basic finance skill. It's funny because it's one of the most basic finance skills, but it's something that's very difficult for a lot of people, including myself. Saving was very hard for me before because it required discipline that I did not want to apply. So it was challenging for me in the beginning because it's like I would say, okay, every month I'm going to save this amount, but then I would save it and then end up just spending all the money on other things that weren't really that important. So a lot of people struggle either because, money's tight, or simply because they lack discipline, which a lot of us do. So anyway, so what types of savings can you possibly have? There are many different types of savings account, which I'm not going to talk about because I do know that some people maybe watch me from different countries and it may not apply in all circumstances. But in terms of savings, there are many different reasons you can save, isn't it? So one of the reasons you can have are purpose-driven savings. That's what I like to call it. So purpose-driven saving would be, for example, saving for your wedding, saving to buy a house, saving to buy a car, saving to pay for your education, saving to go on a holiday that you want to go on, to buy a specific item. That is a purpose-driven saving. So anything that you are saving for that has a specific reason attached to it, that's your purpose-driven savings. We also have your emergency funds or emergency reserve savings. So this would be, let's say in the event you lost your job and you needed money to be able to pay your expenses for the next couple of months, you would use your emergency fund to cover that. There are many different opinions on how much your emergency fund should have, but I will get into that a little bit later. So again, like I said, you have your emergency fund or your reserve fund. If something happens, I can rely on those savings. And then you can also have something called a sinking fund, which is essentially for things like, let's say your car breaks down. It's not necessarily a massive emergency in terms of the amount, but it's just for those other little things that might pop up. For some people, their sinking fund is for birthdays or Christmas. But again, there are so many other ways you can structure things. One thing that I'd say is all about finding a way that works for you. Whatever is effective for you, do that. Everyone's different. The structure of everyone's lives is different. So it's always important just to kind of take a little bit and apply it to you and see what works for you. So yeah, that's definitely another thing that you can have. And then you have investment savings. This is anything you want to save to invest in something. And again, this could be for your retirement. This could be maybe there's an investment you want to make. There's a business you want to invest in. You want to get on the stock market. There are so many reasons and so many different forms of investment. So that's what I would also call an investment saving. That's another purpose. So again, it's all about knowing the reason why you're saving and also how much you can afford to save, that's another thing. But I'd say as a basic starting point, something you need to have is an emergency fund. And this year has really shown us the importance of having an emergency fund, of having those reserve funds if something is to happen. Because a lot of the times, you're so dependent on knowing that I'm going to get paid on the 25th of every month or the 1st of every month, and you just think that's automatically going to happen. But again, sometimes things happen and that doesn't happen. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do if you don't get paid? What are you going to do if you get made redundant? So this is why it's important to have an emergency fund. So one thing I'd say, if you don't have an emergency fund, one way to get started is, first of all, let's aim for 1 month's worth of expenses. So whatever that's going to cover. So when I say expenses, that would be your bills. Well, the bills you have to pay, the things that are really important. Things like subscriptions, let's say Netflix, Spotify, things that aren't necessarily essential for your well-being. You might say Spotify is important for my well-being because I like listening to music. Okay, fair enough. But things that you really need to survive and that you can't live without, those are the things you obviously need to account for. But also things like food. You're going to need food. You're going to need money to travel as well. So you would essentially account for all of those expenses. Sometimes people say as a starter for your emergency fund, £1,000. But for some people, £1,000 is just their mortgage or just their rent. So that might not be enough for you. So definitely finding, what is the amount that's going to get you going for 1 month, that was going to cover food and all your essential. So think about the essentials essentially. So that would be your first starting point. So working towards that goal. But even though you're going to have your emergency fund, you can also save for, let's say you have a purpose-driven fund, but it's all a matter of establishing how much can I actually afford to save in each thing. So before we get to that, one thing that I'd say, a lot of the times when it comes to savings, we set ourselves up to fail. We just come with random amounts in our head. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna save £1,000, but the reality is maybe you don't even have £1,000 left over after your bills are taken out. So perhaps that isn't a realistic amount for you. The best way for you to know what you can actually afford to save is really looking at your salary, looking at all your essential expenses, all the bills you have to pay, your financial commitments each month, and then having a look at what's left over. Let's say, for example, you've subtracted all of your bills, all your essential purchases, and you only have, let's say, £300 left over. If that's a very small amount for you to save, then you can start looking at what things can I actually remove that's going to allow me to be able to save more money. Maybe you can look through some subscriptions that you're paying and things that probably you're not actually using. What happens a lot is that a lot of people are paying for things that they don't actually use. A lot of people are still continuing trials that they forgot to cancel, or you're paying for things that you're not actually using the services of, or things you don't really need. So definitely start looking at what can I cut. If you find that the amount you have left over is quite low and you want to save a bit more, then look at what can go, what can get sacrificed, and then, pause that subscription or cancel it, whatever the case may be. And again, if you're looking at, okay, I'm going to be renewing my phone contract soon, then definitely look for a cheaper deal. A lot of the times when we renew things, we end up going for a more expensive package as opposed to, do you know what, let me get something a bit cheaper, a bit more affordable. At least then when you get something more affordable, you'll be able to save more. So for example, I recently, my phone contract came to an end and I was at the point of renewing or going to a different company. So I decided I'm going to get a SIM only contract because my phone is fairly new. I don't actually need a new phone. I could get one if I wanted to, but I don't need a new phone. So I thought I'm just going to get SIM only, and this is going to save me an extra £30 every single month. Now £30 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but let's say I wanted to save that £30 every month. If I times that by 12, that's going to be over £400 I'm saving every year if my maths has not deceived me. So again, even though it seems like such a small saving, it's gonna add up when you compound it that way. So it's really important to look at, what things can I cut, what things can I change in order for me to be able to save a lot more. So again, like I said, as a starting point, definitely focus on building your emergency fund. If right now you have like £10 in savings, okay, maybe that really does happen. You might be laughing, thinking £10, who can... It happens. There are people that actually have nothing in savings at all. So wherever you're starting from, whether it's a minimal amount, maybe it's less than 1,000, more than 1,000, maybe right now you have lots of money saved and you're in a good position in that aspect, but you want to start saving more. You want to be a bit more serious with how you're saving. Then, like I said, having a purpose is very important. So thinking about, what am I actually saving for? Because sometimes we're just saving because it's a habit or something we know we need to do, but we don't necessarily have a strong enough reason why we're doing it. And as a result, you're so easy to go into your savings and spend that money on things that aren't important because your reason for doing it is really not that significant or strong. So definitely looking at that as well. Why am I saving? What is the goal that I'm working towards? That for me is something that keeps me more disciplined when it comes to my savings. If I'm gonna have to take money out, it's because I really need to use that money, not because I just saw a cute pair of shoes that I wanted to buy, or there's a sale on Zara online, I'm like, yeah, I need to get that. No, it has to be something very important and significant for me to take that money out, because I know that I'm working towards a bigger goal. So definitely that's the one thing that I say is really important. Knowing why you're saving is important, and seeing what you can actually afford. So like I said, whatever that amount is, then you can say to yourself, do you know what, every month I'm going to aim to save at least £100, whatever the amount is, 1,000 depending on your situation. And every month, one thing you need to do is budgeting for the month. A lot of the times we fail to meet our savings goals because we don't budget for the month. We just transfer that money to our savings, but we don't actually think about what are the additional expenses I have, because a lot of the times our expenses vary month on month, because there are some flexible things that do come up. If you have children, sometimes they have trips, sometimes they have needs. The shoes has broken, they need some new PE kit. There's all these different variables, especially when you do have children and you have a family, that you need to account for each month. Your budget for January may not be the same for December. So again, you need to start looking at, what are the essential expenses this month? Are there any things that I need to pay for, things that I need renewing I need to pay for? Because if you're just going by, okay, I do this amount every month, you're transferring it, but you're not thinking about what are those additional expenses that may arise within that month that I need to pay for, you're going to have to take the money back out anyway, and then it defeats the purpose. So each month, an important thing that you need to do is go through your budget, go through your essential purchases for that month, and budget for those things. And then as soon as you've done your budget, you transfer that money to your savings and leave it alone. Leave it, don't touch it. If you need to take it out, you need to really assess, do I really need to? Is this purpose really important or not? And if you find it's not, just leave the money in the account, okay? So that's definitely important as well. So making sure that you are budgeting on a monthly basis and actually tracking your spending as well. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, sometimes it really is hard to be disciplined when it comes to tracking your savings, tracking your spending, sorry. But something that I do, especially when I'm having those weeks where it's like, I really can't bother to go through my account and calculate everything that I've checked. One thing I always do is I'll check how much is in my account, and then I'll check how much left in bills I have to pay, because I have my finance tracker that I use to track that. And then I'll know, okay, there's definitely enough money in there, or this is how much I can spend on food for the rest of the month, etc. So I do it mentally, and then that helps me to stay on track. But if I'm a bit like, I need to really do some detail, then I'll have to literally just go through my transactions and add everything up. So I'm not gonna lie to you, it does get challenging to be disciplined sometimes, but honestly it really does help you a lot, because it helps you to actually see how much you're spending. And sometimes you've overspent without even realizing it, simply because those little purchases, those little £5 here or £10 here, they add up. So it's really important to track your spending on a regular basis, aiming for at least a week, or if you can do it daily, go ahead, that will be helpful. And at the end of the day, you're not losing anything in doing that. You're probably actually saving yourself a lot more money. And that brings me to my next point. If you actually plan out your budget on a monthly basis and break it down weekly, something you can do, if you find that you are underspending in certain budgets, so let's say you had a food shopping budget and you've actually underspent, whatever the amount is that you've underspent, transfer that money to your savings, because that's a great way for you to actually start compounding your savings. Think about it this way, even if you underspent by £5, realistically in a month, maybe in your savings account, you'd have got like £1 in interest, if that, maybe even nothing, or a couple of pennies. So imagine if you're adding an extra £5 every month or every week as you're underspending, it's gonna add up. Even if it's an extra £20 within the month, that is a lot, that's £20 more than you would have had before. So definitely doing things like that will help you as well to grow your savings, especially if you have a very tight budget right now. And another thing that you can do as well is having variable savings accounts, different savings accounts. So for example, you might have a ISA, which is an investment savings account. So that one you might have for, let's say, your house deposit, or to put towards your retirement, or something that's a bit more long term. And then you might have your general savings account, which is like your emergency fund, or maybe it's for a particular purpose. Again, like I said before, maybe it's to put towards buying a car, put towards a deposit on something, a holiday, whatever is your reason for saving. So again, at least then you have it separated mentally as opposed to just putting everything into one account. And then another thing that you can do, if you find that you're someone that you frequently go into your savings account, especially your main one, and you're always just transferring, oh, let me transfer. Something you can do is get in a more restricted savings account. So for example, there's some savings accounts that you can only access the money on a fixed term. So for example, for 2 years, you can put money in, but you cannot take any money out. Or they have, terms where if you do take money out, you will be deducted or you have to pay a specific amount. There's different conditions as to how you can access that money. So if you find that you're struggling to be disciplined and you find yourself going into it for reasons that are really not that deep, not that important, then definitely getting a savings account that restricts your access to it will help you a lot. And of course, working on your discipline and your impulses will help as well. But that's definitely something that you can do on a practical basis to help you to kind of just leave the money alone. And then another thing that you can do as well is just, like I said, thinking about your reasons for it and being committed to your goals. Because if you're not committed to your goals, they're not going to happen. And as much as we all know savings is important, a lot of the times we are not as committed to it as we should be. And something that will help you massively as well is planning your purchases. A lot of the times we overspend because we don't plan our purchases, or we end up overspending because we purchase things and buy things that we never intended on buying in the first place. So if you actually start planning your purchases, if you know, okay, winter's coming up, I'm going to need a winter jacket, then you start looking around before you actually buy anything. You shop around, you have a look at roughly how much it's going to cost, because of course you want to get something that's good quality, looks nice, and it's going to last you a long period of time. And again, you're going to start thinking about, what can I actually afford to spend? Maybe you like the £500 jacket, but you ain't got a £500 budget. So you're going to start looking at, what can I actually afford? And then maybe start putting some money aside. When the time comes, you've planned that purchase, you've got the money, you're not going to put yourself out of pocket to buy it, and then you're good. The problem is sometimes, a lot of the times, we impulse buy. We buy things that we never intended on buying. You see that deal that was never budgeted for, and it's like, oh, that's such a good deal. I need to get that. I need to buy that. And then you end up spending money you don't have to buy things you never actually intended on buying. And a lot of the times, it's not even things that you really need. So it's very important for you to plan your purchases. Plan the things you're going to buy. Set yourself an affordable budget. That is not going to mean you're going to go into overdraft. You're going to have to borrow money from here and there and moving things around in order to be able to afford it. If it's not something you need, if you didn't plan for it, you probably don't really need it. So like I said, my top tips on savings are really just going through your expenses, seeing what you can actually afford to save as well, and being committed to that on a monthly basis. And a great way as well to keep you accountable, to keep you on track, is really start tracking it. Every month you write down how much you saved. It's going to help you to kind of review that, look back, and just be proud of yourself. Like, oh, if I was able to save X amount last month, I can do it. And preparing yourself for those months where you have more expenses. So for example, your birthday month, or a family member's birthday, or your wedding anniversary, so in that month you're going to spend a little bit more, or your children are going back to school. Just those times, those seasons that you're going to have to spend more money, budgeting ahead for those things. There's no harm in planning ahead. There's no harm in doing your budget, let's say a month or two in advance, so you can already start foreseeing how much you're going to need for different things. And if you have opportunity to, let's say for example, do some extra overtime at work, you can do that and put that money towards those additional expenses, so you're not having to go into your savings in order to cover those things. And that's going to help you massively as well. So the key when it comes to your saving is having a purpose for it, having a plan in place. You need a savings plan, knowing how much you're going to be saving, your goal date to meet your goal as well. So let's say you want to save £5,000 within the next 2 years. Breaking that down, seeing how much you actually need to be saving each month. And if you find that your current income doesn't support that, so then start looking at different ways. How can I build up extra income? What are some of the things that I can do to get some more money coming in? If that's going to be, cutting certain expenses that you have, being a bit more strict on how much you're spending each week, maybe taking up some extra hours at work if that's a possibility. Or if you have some talent, some things that you're good at, maybe there's things that you're always doing for people for free or a reduced price. You kind of bump up those prices a little bit more, and start monetizing your talents, saving that money towards your goals. And that's going to help you to kind of reach your goal a lot quicker, as opposed to just having that amount that you're not going to reach and you're not reaching it each month. So definitely setting yourself an amount you can afford, and any shortfalls on that, working on ways to build up that extra income and sticking to it. One of the key things is that consistency. It's discipline. Yes, I know it's hard. It's hard for me too. It's challenging for me too. But the key thing is really knowing what you want and going for it, because if you're not going for your goals, it is not going to happen. I really do hope that you guys found some of these tips that I've given you today useful. If you did, do let me know in the comments. Let me know as well, you know, what other videos do you want to see from me? What other topics do you want me to cover? And I'll definitely make sure I record and put something out there for you guys. So I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Have a great rest of the week, and if you did like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with you guys next week.